Greetings, friends, and welcome back to Recon by Fire. For today's battle breakdown, I am trying out the Houndpack Lance for Chaos Knights, focusing on War Dog spam, and I'm playing against Steve, you running the Necrons in Hypercrypt, which is interesting because speed is really not an issue. Going into the list, I am running one Knight Despoiler with double Gatling cannons because the form of War Dog spam that I'm running has very few shots. So I like having the double Gatling cannon Despoiler to scare infantry off and be able to get rid of chaff while having a solid unit to either guard the home objective or, more importantly, the natural expansion, and I can push more aggressively with my War Dogs. Going into the War Dogs, I am running 3 Huntsmen because I am a big fan of them. The reroll hits, or correction, reroll wounds on monsters' vehicles are mainly the things that can easily take out armigers, and so being able to guarantee that we can take them out is very beneficial, and I like it because it's shooting and melee. Running 4 War Dog Karnivores, one with the -1 incoming AP enhancement, which I think allows it to kind of stick in combat a little longer, but of course, pretty standard. I know most people would run 6 here, but I am not completely sold on the Karnivore just because it's only activating in 1 phase versus 2, though I will admit that the 14-inch movement and reroll charges does make it quite powerful. 1 Stalker to be able to potentially threaten their natural expansion or push them into a corner with that early scout and then attack. Again, I think it may even be a little bit better than the Huntsman just because of the fact that it still gets to carry that Melta but has the Slaughterclaw to be able to punch up versus the Strength 10 Chainsaw. And then an Executioner, which, truth be told, this very much should be a Brigand, but for whatever reason, I completely spaced on the Brigand and just brought the Executioner because I wanted something to be able to screen out the backfield and still be able to get into the fight across the board with those auto cannons. Allied, I'm really sold on this package quite a bit. It's probably a little more than most people care, but I like having the chaff to be able to do secondaries, screen, and pretty much that's it, and potentially threaten the middle if we need to. So I'm running 2 squad 2x3 Nurglings because we're bringing 2 Beast of Nurgle. Those guys are super durable. I continue to be impressed by what they can do. And then a 10-man squad of Bloodletters. They are strictly there to screen out the backfield. Wishbone them or dogbone them across the back line, and that plus either the Nurgling squad or the Executioner will screen out my entire backfield. That is the list. Let's go ahead and dive on into the gameplay. For today's mission, we're playing Supply Drop with the southern objective leaving on turn 4 and the northern objective leaving on turn 5. Deployment is Hammer and Anvil, and we're on terrain layout 7. We'll start with deployment. I infiltrated a Nurgle squad on the natural expansion, so I can immediately get on that if I need to or offer a screen. 1 Beast of Nurgle is out in the open, but can immediately scout into the building nearby. Also prep to do something on the center objective if needed to. The Bloodletters are stretched out across the backfield as stated to guard the home objective as well as screen out that backfield. I put the Stalker on the southern edge to be able to scout either up against the wall or towards their natural expansion to steal it from them for a turn or just hide behind the building. Executioner is helping the Bloodletters screen out the backfield while also having access to shoot down that center firing lane if need be. Despoiler is prepped to, again, also shoot down that firing lane in the subsequent turn, moving through the wall to get exposure, but this way it is completely untargetable by the opponent turn 1. On the center, I have 3 Karnivores that are able to pop through the center crack in between the buildings, as well as around the southern edge to threaten the natural expansion. 2 Huntsmen, again, to offer trades and be able to threaten anything that should come down in the center to expose it. And then 1 Karnivore up near the natural expansion to make sure I can get it on the natural expansion, but moreover can creep through and around the table edge to the north to come down and shoot, or not shoot, but charge the Doomsday Ark should they decide to push it forward towards my natural expansion. Left the 3rd Huntsman and the Beast of Nurgle in deep strike to be able to bring them down later to score secondaries or potentially get a surprise Melta shot in if I need to. Top of round 1, we end up going first and we draw no prisoners and storm hostile objective. I could have cycled it away, but I decided I was fine with not scoring anything initially. Worst case scenario, we get a challenger card, so I just pitch it for a CP. Nothing super surprising. I advance everything forward. The Despoiler goes ahead and exposes itself on the center because I think it's a fairly hard target for him to try to take out turn 1, but it does entice him to expose quite a bit to try to take it out. So that's why that's there. Executioner stays where it's at, not wanting to be exposed to the DDA as it could pick it up in one shot. The 3 Armigers advance, or War Dogs advance, going towards the natural expansion to stage for next turn. Bit of a misplay here as I put the Karnivore touching the building versus the Brigand or the Huntsman. That being said, though, it was the Huntsman didn't get the advance enough to get on there, and obviously Nurglings can't take over the point at OC 0, and so I simply just leave the Nurglings there, stage for next turn, put the War Dog or the Karnivore on there for now, stage the green one to come around the corner to the north as we talked about. Beast of Nurgle scouts into the building, no reason to expose it on the center objective, so stays put, and the other War Dogs will stage behind the building off the template in the center to rush the center next turn. I do scout the Stalker forward and decide to push it as far up against the wall as possible. The only thing that could come out and attack it are the frayed ones, and so this also gives them a little bit of a target to pick up their guys and bring them down on the center. I have them up against the wall, so the only way they'll be able to shoot at it is if something comes down in the center, and hopefully I can crack back a lot harder and take out some things on the top of 2. The Karnivore, the bone one that's on the southern edge, I decided to keep it there. That's a bit of a mistake as well. I could have rushed it forward up against that southern edge of the wall. That way it is still out of line of sight, but it's staged a little bit closer to follow up next turn. But hey, it's been a while since I've done some War Dog spam, so there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve here. Seeing how they're either going to give us a bunch of stuff to shoot at or risk us running away with primary, we go ahead and hold on to no prisoners and discard Storm for a command point. Bottom of round 1 for Steve, he will draw Overwhelming Force and engage on all fronts, and at the end of our turn only picked up the Void Dragon. Slightly uncharacteristic of Steve, he's normally a more aggressive player, but decides to play it pretty passively here and doesn't take the bait on the center. He does move the Nightbringer forward, so into that crevice where it's still in the building, but ends up having line of sight onto our Stalker, unfortunately, and he gets a pretty good hit in, wounding the Stalker quite a bit. The Wraiths simply push onto center objective, giving me a target that if I don't answer, he ends up scoring there on primary, while the Technomancer is safely way off behind the building template, so there's no way I can get to it. Doomsday Arcs scoot forward. The northern one doesn't have line of sight, thankfully, and just remains their stage. Monolith and the Immortals don't go anywhere either, which I'm perfectly okay with. I have to be careful of where that thing is going to come down. I made sure when I positioned myself to screen out the 6-inch from the Monolith so it doesn't show up anywhere threatening in my backfield. The southern DDA will move forward and peeks right around that corner to get line of sight on the Despoiler, well within cover and well quite safe. He takes some pop shots at it, but thankfully does not take it down. I think he ended up scoring maybe 2 wounds on it, so dealing 8 wounds to it. And I was okay with that. I wish he would have had to expose some more, but it is what it is. He did end up scaring me for a moment because the Void Dragon hit so well and the Stalker was bracketed. He ends up pushing the flayed ones through the wall to charge the Armiger or War Dog, hoping to take it down. Those things popped off. If you guys have not seen it, any hit is a crit if you are below half strength and they have sustained hits 1. So they got a ton of shots in. Thankfully, though, he didn't roll that well on the wounds and the Stalker stays alive. The crackback with the claw ends up picking up 4 of the 5, which is a little unfortunate because it does pin me there. Ends up working out in our favor here in a moment, but it is what it is. The fact that I still have it survive at the end of the turn and we control the point is pretty huge. Overall, pretty conservative for him, but it still ends up putting him in a decent staged position. He'll score 1 point for engage on all fronts, and knowing that I have to come out and answer him, he will hold on to Overwhelming Force here. Top of round 2, we have no prisoners from last turn and draw a tempting target. Steve obviously selects the center objective as the tempting target. No surprise there. I normally like to pop off Insane Bravery as soon as possible for primary, but considering on supply drop, you score 8 points on primary on round 4 and full 15 on round 5. It's a little bit better to keep it for the late game. So I went ahead and rolled for the Stalker. We succeeded, giving us the full 10 points on primary this turn, which was nice. I decided to leave the Stalker in combat because I wanted to utilize its Melta into the Nightbringer, and so I left it in combat. Because of that, I went ahead and pushed the Bone Karnivore forward to charge in and take out the flayed one before it could potentially plink off the last wounds on the Stalker. That also gives us the ability to push back any deep strikes from the Necrons, as well as the threatening anything on the other side of the natural expansion because of the movement on the Karnivore this subsequent turn. In a really solid play from Steve, he ends up rapid the Void Dragon on the other side of the wall. We decide that we have to take something off the board this turn because they have way too much firepower, and the Nightbringer is the one that's exposed to the majority of our army. And in my experiences, because of that 4-up, half damage, and the Feel No Pain, Meltas are good against them, but not great because of the 4-up Anvil. And so I like to overcommit when it comes to the C'tans, and that's exactly what we do. I decide that the Oath of Moment or the sustain hits, I forget what it's called, we mark the Nightbringer, and that's our all-in target. The Beast of Nurgle peeks around the other side of the wall to get on the center objective, forcing their opponent to decide on whether they want to actually shoot into the Beast of Nurgle or try to take out our War Dogs. We move in on with the Karnivore, both Karnivores to the center as well, just to threaten additional charges to try to pick it up if shooting doesn't do it, and the ability to tie in the Wraith. I already made the decision that I'm going to ignore the Wraith for the majority of the game if I can. I will tie them up every turn to mitigate their movement, and so they can't do the flyby mortals. And we line up the Despoiler so I could shoot down the center but get some kind of cover. That being said, I feel like this would have been a good turn for it to also start to creep closer to the natural expansion to take over for the Karnivore. That way the Gold Karnivore can back out of it and start to advance. But I ended up being a little conservative. The Executioner scoots forward just to be able to see the DDA across the board. And then because, again, I decided I was going to commit to the Nightbringer, I wanted to get as many shots as possible. And so we bring in the Huntsman from reserves off that table edge, knowing that we could pick it up at the end of the turn, at their turn, if we needed to. And it does get additional shots into the Nightbringer. Again, trying to screen out anything from the Void Dragon, pushing it back as far as possible, trying to get board control. We advance the Nurglings, and they go up against that wall to, again, push them as far back as possible. And we measured it. The second squad of Nurglings are down by where the Karnivores were in the Stalker, and they push off, again, screening that. So at this moment, I have practically my entire board screened out, with the majority of it also screening out the 6-inch deep strike potential from the Immortals, but it's clearly blocking out the Monolith, which was one of my big worries. We fire everything we can into the Nightbringer, and it survives all of our shooting, which is a little frustrating, but it is what it is. The Executioner shoots across the board to the DDA, knocks off, I think, 6 wounds off of it. Actually, it brackets it, whatever. So maybe 9 wounds to bracket it. If I shot the Despoiler into it, I probably could have picked it up, but I want volume of fire into the Void Nightbringer because I wanted to not charge it. If I fail to kill it in the charge, it would 100% kill whatever's there, and I'm giving them something on my turn. It comes down to me having to tank shock with the Huntsman, but it does do the trick, which is thankful. And then we get the Karnivore and 1 Huntsman into the race to fight. That does allow us to pick off 2 of them. He pulls the one that's in the center of the body of the group, of the unit, and the one that is on the center objective, which I'm perfectly okay with. Even if it resurrects models onto the objective, we still out-OC them, so they're not going to score that one, which was huge. The Technomancer was, again, off the template, so I did not have eyes on, and I could not precision with my Huntsman to pick it up there, though I did consider it. And yeah, that was pretty much a quick turn for us. The Karnivore does make it in and pick off that one flayed one, and I elect not to consolidate, so I stay on this side of the template, making it awkward for the Void Dragon to get line of sight on both of them. We do score our 5 points for tempting target and 4 points for taking down the Nightbringer and the flayed ones, which worked in our favor. I am taking the time to diversify the content here on the channel because I know some people want that rapid fire battle report to see what's going on, and then other people like a more in-depth breakdown to see the mentality and strategy behind things. So we're doing that. Definitely, if you're still watching, give us a like and share the video with a friend, as it really helps us out. And hey, it'll let me know that this is something you guys want to continue to see, and I will continue to put it out, because obviously these do require some time to make, but significantly less time than my fully edited rapid fire battle reports. Thanks again for watching. Bottom of round 2 for the Necrons. They still have overwhelming force from last turn and draw a storm hostile objective. A little unfortunate for us, but they decide to keep everything on the board, which I consider a win. That makes me feel really good about our screening, so I would happily take that. Start off with the movement. As we expected, the Void Dragon does move in on the southern side of the board to threaten their natural expansion. I take advantage of that to spend a command point to reactive move the full Karnivore back as far as I can, which is the 6 inches in a straight back line, to make it as difficult as possible on the Void Dragon. And moreover, it wasn't wholly within the building on the template, and so I scooted over to the north a little bit so it's out of line of sight and couldn't get a shot in on the war dog that was on the point, the stalker. He does fire into the Karnivore, but rolls kind of poorly. I make the Anvil, and we're good to go. I take no damage, which is great. DDA fires across the board into the Despoiler, and thankfully does no damage. It rolls poorly. I roll good on my saves, and we're good to go there. Again, the spoiler feels kind of bad in this matchup because of everything having an Anvil and high toughness, so I'm okay with him putting shots into it. That's why I feel like I could have been a little more aggressive with it, but I was okay with it as long as he was willing to consider it. Because the Huntsman on the center, I had to base the Nightbringer. I am towing into that objective, and despite the fact that I can't see across it, we did say, since I'm a vehicle and I'm touching it, that the DDA can shoot into it. If we're wrong, by all means, let me know in the comments down below. We play a lot, but there's still a lot of rules that we're kind of iffy on. So the DDA in the center of the board shoots into that one, wounds it pretty good, but does not take it down. He falls back with the Wraiths in order to be able to shoot at everything I need to. Forgot to mention it last round, but this Huntsman here is not a character, but it did reroll high enough on the charge where I was able to get around the wall and touch the Wraiths just to keep them in combat, even if the other two did well on taking him down. It didn't, but again, it wasn't the character, so it was not able to precision out the Technomancer either. Monolith stays in place and took a gamble and fired everything into the Beast of Nurgle, and whiffs on the high cannon, whatever it's called, but the one that's D something damage, completely whiffs on it, and then rolls low on the tentacles or lashes or whatnot, and does some damage, but not enough to take it down. Of course, it fully heals at the end of the phase, which was a fantastic look for our part, and ends up leaving everything else alone. Just wanted to be a little conservative here, which I will happily take. Poor shooting phase for them. They fell back with the race, so they don't get to do anything either. And yeah, that's all that goes down, and I am totally okay with that. Got pretty fortunate here. That being said, he does make the charge into the Wounded Stalker with the Void Dragon. I stayed off the point on purpose because I didn't want the Void Dragon to potentially have an easy kind of consolidate or pile in. Also, if he brought in the Immortals on the southern edge, he would have been able to get reroll or wound rerolls because it was on an objective. So I moved that Karnivore completely off, and I was okay with that. I just didn't want him to get 2 units for 1, and that way it gives me the ability, if I choose to on the next turn, to shoot into the Void Dragon, depending on what our secondaries are. But that's going to end the turn, and I end up not picking up anything here because he left that Northern Huntsman alone. I figured it was going to be a good way to pressure his DDA around the corner, and so that stayed on the objective. Not as a lethal turn as he would liked, but he did score 3 points for overwhelming force on that southern objective, and also scoring a Storm Hostile there. Top of round 3 for us, we end up drawing Engage on all fronts and Assassination. Still control 2 objectives in the center, so we easily score 10 points, which is a win for us. It's an interesting turn here because, as I stated previously, I set myself up where I could have potentially pushed towards the Void Dragon to try to pick it up. And with Assassination, it kind of incentivized to do that because unfortunately, the only other way I could score Assassination at this moment would be to charge in with the Huntsman and score Precision. Epic Challenge to get that in there. But it's a little risky, not something I was the biggest fan of. And then the other Huntsman that would have been easier on the charge would end up being Battle Shocked, which is the one you could see up north. Again, as we talked earlier, I think when it comes to the Catans, you either have to commit everything in your army or completely ignore them. And with only the Karnivore, one Karnivore being within charge range, potentially a second if the one on the center moved towards it. The problem is that was then going to put me in a very awkward position where I was giving my opponent more board space and better positioning in the future. And I like the fact that I was choking them on spaces to come down. And because of that, I went ahead and leaned into that and decided to just pick up more pieces off the table and force them to be like, okay, are you going to score points with the Void Dragon or are you going to kill stuff? And I decided to ignore the Void Dragon. The Karnivore simply moves onto the objective, does not charge it, just lands on it. That way I'm able to seize control of it because I OC it. It's 4 OC, we're 6. And so boom, done. It's cool. I'm good with that. I don't have to charge it because there's a good chance that it's going to pick it up. Executioner remains in place, again, needing it there to screen out that backfield alongside the Bloodletters. It would have been easier if he didn't have the 6-inch deep strike, but because he did, I wanted to continue to deny that and choke him on the board. The Nurglings spread out a little bit to, again, force that screen. Then the Despoiler now moves on to the natural expansion, taking that over for the Karnivore. We advance the gold Karnivore. It comes around the corner. It's not going to do anything this turn, but that's okay. We're just staging, again, screening. The Nurglings on the north side push forward again, pushing back that screen again. They're not doing anything but screening, and I am perfectly okay with that. All four of the War Dogs go ahead and move on to the center. He fires Overwatch, I believe with the DDA, to try to kill the wounded dog, and it hits it but does not take it down, thankfully, so we're good with that. The Red Karnivore moves in on the DDA. We end up firing the Executioner to the DDA, and it leaves it at 5 wounds. I had the choice of firing the Despoiler into it and elected not to because I figured 5 wounds with a Karnivore should be enough to pick it off, even with the Anvil, right? Everyone tells me Karnivores are amazing, so I wanted to try to be as efficient with my fire as possible. And the problem is if I did take down the DDA in shooting, there was nothing left for that Karnivore to do, and I would have negated it. And so because of that, we fire the Despoiler into the Void Dragon to plink off some wounds. We end up plinking off just 4 wounds, which is better than expected, but I'll take it. It's still going to be able to heal, but at least there's a couple of wounds off of it. Should I decide to do something to it later on, might as well. Everything shoots into the DDA, ends up not taking it down. It survives because of the 4-up invuls, and I whiffed. So the Huntsman, the Black Huntsman, charges into it and finishes it off. Then the Green Karnivore and the Black Huntsman go into the Wraiths again, not expecting to take them down, but again, tying them up, and it's perfect. Pick up a decent amount of them, but there's still one in melee contact, which is fantastic because now, again, they are stuck. In a clutch move, I gotta say, Steve did heal using the Reanimator guy, the Technomancer, heal the DDA twice, and that's why I did not go down, which was huge. Great big bang play on him. And then we simply move forward the Beast of Nurgle, so it is out of direct line of sight of the Monolith, so he can't shoot at it again without exposing himself, which I am perfectly okay. Again, another piece that if you want to commit something to it, by all means. So we end up giving up Assassination, which I am totally okay with, discard it for a command point, and you score the full 4 points on Engage on all fronts, which is pretty awesome. And I was prepared, if needed to either bamf out the Executioner or the Gold Karnivore on the top of the screen at the end of the next turn, or potentially their turn. If the DDA remained in combat with me, hopefully the Karnivore will pick it up, and then I can bamf it out as well, dependent. But we'll see how it goes. Bottom of round 3, and Steve draws Area Denial and defends Stronghold. He ends up cycling Area Denial, not expecting to get it for anything, and draws behind enemy lines. So us screening did a fantastic job this turn. I'll take it. And again, because he only scored No Man's Land and we took over the point with the Karnivore, we deny him primary again, which is phenomenal. His challenger card this turn was all in, which I don't remember what it was, but it looks like he didn't score anyways, which I'll take it. Normally when he scores challenger cards, he gets them pretty easily, but we rocked it this time, which I'm totally cool. I'm sure you guys know which one it is. He decides to leave the DDA in combat and again heals it with the Technomancer, so it is no longer bracketed, which is pretty huge. It stayed in place, so it got heavy, so it was just hitting on 3s anyways. Did forget to mention, we brought in the Beast of Nurgle here behind the wall on our natural expansion to guard it. Should he continue to fire on the Despoiler and take it out, we still had something on the point and could lift up the Karnivore to move it should we potentially need to as an insurance policy. He fires the DDA that's in combat into the Huntsman that was in combat with the Wraiths and takes it down. It doesn't explode, which is unfortunate, but he'll take it. He then fires everything from the Monolith into the new Huntsman, the fresh one, hoping to take it down as that's a lot of firepower. And in a surprise to both of us, I somehow survive. I don't quite remember if I re-rolled the save. I think I might have, because it would have been the difference between him dying or not, so I wanted to leave him alive. And again, the Wraiths were in combat, so they weren't able to do their flyby mortals on anyone. He brings in the not Lords, the Death Marks and the Immortals here on this back corner to fire into the Karnivore that's fighting with the DDA. Knocks off some wounds, but does not take it down, which I am plenty happy with. That is fantastic for us because it's a big part of my plan. And then the Void Dragon obviously charges the Karnivore. I was hoping, it charges and it picks it up. I was essentially saving the CP to fight on death and then pick up the Karnivore or Executioner at the end of their turn. But in a surprise move, Steve ends up charging the Monolith into the Huntsman because it was at 2 wounds or something. So a single hit would have taken it out, which then opened the door for me to heroic with the green Karnivore. So it was a change of plan because, again, I already had my CP sent. I was going to fight on death with the Karnivore on the Void Dragon and then bamf out the Executioner or the Karnivore to the north at the end of his turn. But with that, it changed the plans. I really wasn't going to interrupt because, again, one Karnivore is not going to take down a Void Dragon even if I roll well. So we get there. The Huntsman survives, doesn't lose, and so we end up using 1 CP to heroic intervene with the Karnivore. It does a ton of damage to the Monolith, even with him rotating for the 4-up Anvil. It surprised the heck out of both of us, and I rolled high on the damage, and the Monolith is down to, I think, like 8 wounds or something like that. And Void Dragon picks it up. I do fight on death. It rolls horribly, and I think I do like 3 damage to it, maybe 2 damage. That's fine. I'll take it. Again, plinking off a couple of wounds is sure enough fine. And then in a big upset, surprisingly enough, which was actually pretty huge, the Karnivore that's where it whiffs. This Karnivore in the south into the DDA completely whiffs. I mean, 1-1-2-2. And does not, and then he makes his Anvil and does not kill the DDA that is just slightly over bracketed. It was super annoying because that was going to be huge. I was going to be able to then charge the Death Marks and whatnot, but it is what it is. That ends his turn. Unfortunately, he ended up not really accomplishing much this turn and didn't score any of his secondaries. He pitched behind enemy lines for a command point, but held on to defend stronghold for hopefully the Monolith to keep it alive. Top of round 4, we end up drawing Marked for Death and Cleanses our secondaries. We control the center and the northern objective on turn 4, which means we get 8 for each of them for a total of 16 points here, which was huge. Marked for Death targets are the Void Dragon and the 2 squads that are deep back, or the Wraiths, and then the squad of Death Marks that I can't get to. That's cool. We end up making our primary gamma target the DDA, and we kind of talked through it here at this point. I end up picking up the Monolith and the DDA finally. With that being said, it denies him holding defend. It also leaves him only with the Wraiths, the Death Mark, the Immortal, and the Void Dragon. Steve's seen enough here, and we decide to call it as the score was already 66-18. Yes, he could score big at the last turn, but At that point, he's mitigating any ability to take out any of my units. I have control of the majority of the board, so he's restricted to where he can move to. And yeah, so we call it there with the final score being 66 to 18. I think a very solid performance. It was nice having this many activations. This list leans a little heavier onto the allies than most people I think do. But again, it gave me the ability to be very aggressive with my war dogs, forcing the stat check from my opponent where I didn't need to leave really anything behind to screen out the Hypercrypt, which will also work with Grey Knights and other units that rely heavily on Deep Strike. I was screening out the 6-inch fairly confidently. And so it felt great. Denying the early primary really gave us the lead where we denied that big catch-up mechanic at the end of the game the supply drop normally lasts. Overall, I was fairly happy with my gameplay. The Despoiler was pretty medium to bad in this matchup, but again, it's flat 2 damage. He didn't really have a lot of chaff for me to shoot, so it is bad in this performance. But the thing I've noticed with this list in particular, because I wasn't running any brigands and stuff like that, is my number of attacks hurt me. And so having that Despoiler to fill up that gap and giving me something that I felt comfortable as a distraction Carnifex or guarding my natural expansion. Again, it soaked up 2 rounds of shooting from big stuff that would have picked up an Armiger that didn't. And so I felt like it did its job. Really happy with it. It's not as potent here as it is in Trader's Lance, but I like it. I think this could easily be a Lancer if people wanted to, just another thing to ram down the opponent's throat, force them to deal with it while you advance all your other war dogs and then apply pressure the next turn, I think is a great play as well. You could play a Rampager, an Abominant. I think that's fine. I'll be honest with you. I haven't had a lot of experience with those. And so I wanted to, because I was leaning heavier on the Huntsman and Carnivores that are a little more in your face. That's why I wanted something a little more long range. So I think that is something you consider in the list going forward of what suits your preference. Executioner, it was medium to bad, to be completely honest. I really brought it for the range and the extra 10 points for the enhancements. But I think next time we run this list, we're going to swap it out for a Brigand and keep the list as is and see how it goes. But that will do it for today, my friends. I hope you got something out of it. If you did and you're still watching, by all means, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think about Houndpack Lance and share the video with a friend. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, as always, happy gaming.